Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a real classic, one that still sparks a lot of conversation. The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles.
That's right. A fascinating little book from the early 20th century.
And for this deep dive, we're zeroing in specifically on Chapter 4. Our mission really is to take the core lessons from just that chapter, maybe simplify the language a bit for today, and just talk it through conversationally.
Like we're grabbing coffee and hashing it out.
Exactly. We know you, our listener, want to get the insights quickly but also deeply without feeling totally bogged down.
Yeah, Wattles can be quite dense sometimes, even though he aims for practicality.
Right. So get ready to unpack the essential principles he laid out over a century ago for achieving financial success. And remember, this book wasn't meant as just philosophy. It was positioned as a pragmatic manual.
Definitely. He states up front, it's for people who want to get rich first and maybe philosophize later.
Okay, so Chapter 4, the title is The First Principle in the Science of Getting Rich. Where does he start? What's the absolute core idea here?
Well, he hits the ground running with a pretty bold assertion. He basically says that thought capital T perhaps is the only power capable of producing tangible riches from what he calls formless substance.
Okay, hang on. Formless substance, that sounds a bit mystical. What exactly does he mean by that?
Yeah, it's a central concept. Think of it as the raw material of the universe, a
Yeah.
kind of thinking energy or thinking stuff, as he puts it, from which everything is made.
Drinking stuff. Okay.
And the crucial part is this. According to Wattles, any thought of a specific form, if held within this substance, actually produces that form. The substance thinks, and the thing appears.
So the substance itself is intelligent. It responds to thought.
That's the idea.
Mm.
He uses nature as a big analogy. Every form we see, mountains, rivers, plants, and every process like growth or weather is just the visible expression of a thought within that original substance. So when the formless thinks of a shape, it takes that shape. When it thinks of motion, it creates that motion. That's how, in his view, everything got created. We're basically living in a thought world within a thought universe.
Wow. Okay. That's a big picture. Does he give more concrete examples? Still feeling a little abstract?
He does try to ground it. He talks about the thought of a moving universe,
Yeah.
right? That thought, impressed on the formless substance, resulted in planets, solar systems, all held in motion because the thinking matter continues to hold that thought.
Right.
Or a simpler one, the thought of an oak tree growing slowly. That specific thought activates the necessary forces over time to produce the tree along the, established lines of biological growth.
Okay. So the thought initiates it, but it often works through existing natural processes.
Exactly. And that leads to the implication for us, for humans. Any thought of a form that we hold in this thinking substance starts the process of creating that form. Usually, he clarifies, through the established ways of doing things, trade, industry, nature, etc.
Which brings me to the obvious question. If I sit here and think really, really hard about a brand new laptop, is it just going to materialize on my desk? Because, well, that sounds a bit like wishful thinking.
Yeah, the million-dollar question, right? Wattles addresses this. He suggests that thinking about the laptop impresses that form onto the substance. But it probably won't just poof into existence.
Probably not. Okay. So what happens instead?
Instead, that thought might start directing existing creative energies, maybe in commerce, maybe in your own actions or opportunities, to bring that laptop to you quickly. Things start aligning in the normal world,
Okay, so it works through the world mostly.
mostly. But, and this is a key but, for him, if there were no existing channels for that created energy to work through, then theoretically the laptop could be formed directly from the primal substance, though he admits that's not the usual way.
Still, he makes this incredibly strong statement somewhere in there, doesn't he? Something like,
No thought of form can be impressed upon the original substance without causing the creation of the form.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a very definitive claim. No wiggle room there.
that's bold. So where do humans fit into this more actively?
Well, that's the next big step in the chapter. He calls humans thinking centers. We're not just channels, we can have original thought. Unlike, say, a rock or maybe even an animal in his view.
Original thought, meaning,
We can conceive of things that don't yet exist. I mean, everything humans have ever created with their hands, a tool, a building, a piece of art. It had to exist first as a thought in someone's mind.
yeah, absolutely. A blueprint, an idea, a sketch.
Exactly. And Wattles contrasts this with how humanity has mostly operated by working with existing forms, modifying what nature provides. Manual labor, essentially.
Shaping wood, mining ore.
But he's pointing towards a different potential, creating new forms directly, by impressing our original thoughts onto this universal formless substance. It's like tapping into a much deeper creative power.
Okay, so this leads him to lay out some core principles for his science, doesn't it?
Yes, he summarizes the foundation in 3 fundamental propositions. You really need to grasp these, he says.
Let's hear them. What's the first?
First, there is this thinking stuff, this formless original substance from which all things are made, all the different elements we see, just different presentations of this one element, all the forms in nature, just different shapes made from the same stuff.
Okay, so an underlying unity, one substance.
And crucially, it's thinking stuff. A thought held in it produces the form of the thought. Thought in thinking substance produces forms. That's point 1.
Got it. And then the second.
Second follows directly. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imagined by the thought. It makes the image real.
A direct link between the thought image and the resulting thing.
Exactly. And the third proposition brings us squarely into the picture.
Which is?
Third, humans can form things in their thoughts, and by impressing their thought upon this formless substance, they can cause the thing they think about to be created.
Wow. So we're not just observers, we are active creators using this substance via our thoughts.
That's the core message. We can tap into this universal creative process.
Now, I can imagine some people hearing this and thinking, okay, prove it. How does Wattles handle skepticism?
He actually anticipates that. He says these propositions can be reasoned out logically, but more importantly, they're validated by experience and observation. The ultimate test, he says very pragmatically, is, does applying these principles actually make you rich?
Right, the proof is in the results. Very direct.
And this connects directly to how people get rich. He argues it's not random. People get rich by doing things in a certain way. Capital T, capital W again.
A certain way. Okay, like a specific method or strategy.
Yes, but the method, the action, stems from something deeper. Doing things in a certain way is the result of thinking in a certain way. So acquiring the ability to think in that desired way is the absolute first step towards wealth.
So it all comes back to thought control, essentially. Thinking in a certain way. What does that mean in practice?
He defines it quite specifically. Thinking what you want to think, he says, means thinking the truth, regardless of appearances.
Thinking the truth, regardless of appearances. That sounds challenging.
Oh, he fully acknowledges that. He states flat out, it takes far more effort to think the truth you want to believe, despite contrary evidence, than it does to just think thoughts suggested by what you see around you.
So thinking according to appearances is easy, reactive. Thinking truth against appearances is hard work.
Exactly. It requires real mental labor, significant mental power, he calls it. Because the visible world constantly bombards our minds and tends to create corresponding thoughts. You see lack, you tend to think lack.
It's like fighting the current of immediate reality.
Precisely. You have to consciously hold the thought of the truth to counteract the influence of appearances.
Does he give examples of this? It sounds quite abstract still.
Yes, he gives a couple of very stark ones. Imagine looking at sickness, he says. That appearance of sickness can easily produce the form or thought of sickness in your own mind, and potentially in your body, unless, he emphasizes, you consciously hold to the thought of the truth about sickness, which in his view is, there's no sickness in ultimate reality, it's only an appearance, and the reality is health.
Wow, that's a strong reframe. And poverty.
Same principle. Looking at appearances of poverty can create corresponding forms of limitation in your own mind. Unless you hold firmly to the truth that there is no poverty, only abundance. That lack is just an appearance obscuring the ever-present abundance of the formless substance.
That requires some serious mental discipline.
Absolutely. And he says that thinking health amidst sickness or thinking wealth amidst poverty requires power. But, and this is the payoff, those who acquire this power become what he calls a mastermind.
A mastermind.
Yeah, someone who can conquer fate, basically.
Right.
Someone who can have what they want because they've mastered their own thought process in relation to this underlying reality.
Okay, so how do we get this power? What's the practical step according to Chapter 4?
It starts, he says, by grasping that basic fact we talked about. There is one thinking substance from which all things are made. Really internalizing that.
Believing in the formless substance.
Yes, and understanding that a thought held in it becomes a form. And crucially, that you, as a human, can impress your thoughts upon it, to cause those thoughts to manifest as visible things.
So internalizing those 3 propositions we discussed earlier.
Exactly. And if you truly grasp this, he argues, doubt and fear begin to dissolve. Because if you know this is true, then you know you can create what you want to create, Have what you want to have, become what you want to be. There's no room left for fear about lack or failure, theoretically.
It sounds like achieving a state of profound certainty.
That's the goal, which is why he hammers home that accepting these three fundamental propositions is the essential first step. You have to believe them, almost as an act of faith to start with.
An act of faith. He really emphasizes belief then.
Immensely. He goes further and advises adopting what he calls a monistic view of the universe, basically. All is one and one is all. That this single substance is manifesting as everything we see. And you need to dwell on this thought constantly.
Dwell on it. And what about doubts?
Discard them. He literally says you should consider doubt as sinful, as it denies the fundamental truth he's presenting.
Wow, that's strong language. Sinful.
He's very insistent. He even advises not to engage with contradictory ideas. Don't listen to sermons or lectures. Don't read books or articles that teach a different concept of reality.
Really? Avoid conflicting information entirely.
That's what he recommends, at least while you're trying to establish this new way of thinking. He warns that confusion or division in your belief system will basically nullify your efforts. You need complete focus.
So, no, why is this true, or how did this actually work? Questions.
He explicitly tells the reader not to ask those questions. Don't speculate on the hows and whys. Just take it on faith and trust the process. Test it by applying it.
Just accept it.
Yes. And he concludes the chapter by stating very clearly, the science of getting rich begins with the absolute acceptance of this faith. That's step one, period.
Okay. So, if we boil down this whole deep dive into chapter 4, the absolute core takeaway seems to be the immense power of directed thought.
Absolutely. Thought, specifically thought directed with firm belief, focused on what he calls the underlying truth of abundance and possibility. That's the foundation upon which everything else in his science is built.
It's really about shifting your whole mental framework, moving beyond just reacting to the world or focusing only on physical actions and stepping into, well, the power of focused mental energy.
Precisely. It's a fundamentally different perspective on how wealth creation actually works, starting from the inside out.
Which leaves us with a thought for you, the listener, to mull over. How might consciously directing your thoughts, particularly when faced with appearances that seem to contradict your desires, actually shift your perception of what's possible?
Yeah, how could that focus change your ability to see opportunities, or maybe even, as Wattles suggests, influence reality itself to manifest the outcomes you're aiming for?
Something to think about. We definitely encourage you, if this resonates, to explore the rest of the science of getting rich to see how he builds on this foundational principle in the later chapters.
It certainly sets the stage for the actions and attitudes he discusses next.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.